Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I guess we can call this the week of much content because we are now dropping our third of four Insider podcast episodes leading up to opening day on Saturday. Today, we are going to be discussing our National League predictions as well as our World Series predictions connected to our episode from yesterday, the AL predictions. So, if you haven't watched the AL predictions video yet, you need to go back and watch that one first because there will be some spoilers in this one as we talk about our World Series predictions. But we're here to talk about the NL here tonight, and with me, as always, is my amazing co-host, Mr. J. Dick Vitale R.
It seemed like everybody loved our awesome AL predictions episode. Let's hope we can have this one live up to it.
I know you dropped. I thought I was dropping a bomb, and then you dropped the whole Seattle Cinderella story bomb. People should have left by now to go watch the AL one, so hopefully that wasn't too much of a spoiler for people.
But yeah, we were kind of like slowly paddling along. Chalk, a little chalk here, a little chalk there, a little subtle surprise here or there, and then boom, we were off to the races.
The AL West and the wild card was where all the bombs were dropped. That's for sure. Will we have more bombs dropping today as we talk about the National League? Well, without further ado, let's get into it as I get the right screen here. So we've got our tier lists ready to go, and you won't see any on-screen editing for me this time because I do have the playoff ones ready to go. So we won't have to see any on-screen editing for that. But here we go. We have the National League, and we'll do what we did last time. Or do you want to do opposite? We want to go west to east, or do you want to go east to west?
I chose last time. It's all on you, partner.
I'm trying to think what would be. I think the West is actually going to be one of the most interesting conversations. So we'll start with the East and go towards the West. So starting with the NL East, it's actually a little tougher to predict because some of the teams that were finishing at the bottom of the division last year, I think, are making some strides. They got, I'm specifically thinking of the Marlins. They have a lot of young players that are going to start hitting the majors. They always make some shrewd, financially smart decisions when it comes to signing free agents, especially when it comes to the fan popularity players to help put butts in seats in Miami because they are a low finance team. So you have to give credit where credit is due for Eddie over there in Miami. So I think as a result, and this may shock some people, but I'm going to put the New York Mets in fifth place. I think last year was a little bit of an overperformance based on the talent that they have on their roster. Now, Gianfran Escalona is a legit talent. I just think supporting cast around him, I don't think the Mets do what they did last year this year. I think they see a regression to the mean as I use my statistics experience. And I think that coupled with the improvements that I think Miami's making this year, I think New York falls all the way to number 5.
Yeah, I actually have the Mets there too.
Wow. I mean, I thought I'd drop it just like last time. I think I'd said something profound, and you go right ahead and, oh yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to some of what we talked about on our winners and losers of the offseason podcast. Is that last year this division was pretty tightly packed. At various points you had the Mets in the lead, you had the Phillies in the lead, you had the Nationals in the lead. And we weren't really sure who was going to emerge, and the Nationals ended up winning it and going all the way to the World Series. But the Mets and Phillies, I think, had every opportunity to kind of step forward and win that division last year. So they were right there. But really this offseason, I've been surprised. I really thought the Mets might have made a couple more moves, especially to help out their offense. Try to add some pieces there, and it just hasn't happened. You mentioned Escalona. He's obviously a stud. In that pitching staff, but I'm not real crazy about too much else kind of beyond him. And they could be in a spot where maybe you end up getting to a point where you look to try to trade him to kind of replenish some talent and reload to try to get back up there. But yeah, I unfortunately think they may be in the cellar for this year.
So I guess the next question will be how far do we think Miami will climb this year? Because they were the 5th place team last year. They've been kind of near the bottom for the past couple seasons. How far did they climb this year? So who do you have at number 4?
I do have the Marlins at number 4. I think they take, that step forward. Um, you know, I was coming very close to putting them a little bit higher, and I think if not for some late moves in the offseason by Philly, once the Hebrew Hama took over the GM spot there, um, I might have been even more tempted to put Miami at 3, but I've got them at 4. Like they added Adam Hazley. I really liked that signing. They brought in some veterans like Jose Altuve, Paul Goldschmidt, Anthony Rizzo. They've got Luke Leto and Red Ditt, who are going to form just an incredible middle of the infield combo. Yep. So it's definitely a team on the rise. I don't know that they're ready to break through into the top 3 yet, but I do think they take a step forward this year.
Yeah, and I also have already added Miami to the number 4 spot. I think they take a step forward this year, and I think it's a sign of things to come. I think in a few seasons we'll see Miami near the top, but you have to take. I don't think you're going to see a jump like you predicted on a certain AL Central team, but I think they're going to take a step forward this year for sure. For all the reasons that you already said, I don't really need to reiterate that. I'll go ahead and put up my number 3 team up there, and that is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies. While I do like some of the moves they did this offseason, I think Correa might have been a little bit expensive. We'll have to see how his re-rate works out. But they had money to spend, and spend it they did. So you have to think that they're committed to trying to win. I just think the talent in Philadelphia is still less than what it is in Washington and Atlanta. I think they probably have a better team this year than they did last year, but I still think that they're going to end up 3rd in the division.
Yeah, that's where I have them also. Again, I would come pretty close maybe to putting them 2nd. I think one of the things we got to remember with them is they missed Manny Machado for all of the 2025 season. So they were able to kind of be in contention there in that division even without him. They get him back. You mentioned Correa. I think again it's going to come down to the pitching staff, and a lot of those signings that I mentioned kind of late in the game were for the bullpen. Really trying to shore up the bullpen. I'm still not crazy about that Clay Holmes contract that was handed out, but I know they were trying to really address their pitching staff to see if that would work out.
Yeah, and it could still work out. It's just maybe not so much money for Clay. The Correa deal, if the re-rate works out, could be a good signing for how much he signed for. But with Holmes, what you see is what you get, and we'll have to see if because he was a starter turned closer, and you have to wonder how he's going to be used this year and if he'll be effective in whatever role he's going to be used in.
Yeah, because it's been a while since he's been a starter again.
Yep, exactly. All right, who you got at number 2?
I do have the Braves at number 2. I just don't think they've done quite enough to have me put them ahead of Washington. Washington continues to prove things year after year. But I mean, I love a lot of the moves that Aiden Pearson has made for the Braves over the offseason. You bring in the reigning AL MVP, Alex Verdugo. That's obviously a big boost to that lineup. They were able to move Jose Ramirez's contract and get a guy back in Jacques Landry at 3rd base, who, I am thinking, making the bold prediction that he actually finishes this season with a higher WAR than Jose Ramirez. I think he's going to be a solid player there.
Now, is that because J-Ram gets injured or just because he outperforms him?
I think he just outperforms him.
Okay, all right.
I think that ends up being the case, but they have a really good lineup. I think the thing with the Braves is going to be the pitching. We already saw Mike Soroka got hurt here in just this past sim we had here toward the end of spring training, so he's going to miss, a couple weeks here to start the season. Max Fried had a little bit of a dinged injury, so those two and the young pitching, we got to see what'll happen there.
Yeah, and I also will put Atlanta in the 2 spot. I think so, kind of the opposite of what happened with the Mets. I think the Braves underperformed to their talent last year. And while I do think that Aiden might be on the verge of doing that, I talked last podcast about how Detroit knew they had to make moves to get back into the playoffs, but they didn't overcorrect. Aiden, I feel like, is more towing the line on that overcorrection because he talked about trying to get a younger player in Jock Landry who was locked up for a long time, and then he goes out and trades a bunch of prospects for a player on the last year of his deal in Alex Verdugo. So it's kind of like, okay, what are you trying to go for? Are you trying to go for the future? Are you trying to go for right now? Which one is it? Now, Jock Landry could be a good piece right now, but talent-wise, you still have to think Jose Ramirez was better, even though you predicted that the WAR could be in Jock's favor. I just think that sometimes the moves contradict himself, but at the end of the day, he still has a very strong roster. He's got one of the strongest starting rotations if they can stay healthy. That was one of their issues last year with their starting rotation is injuries hurt them. And if their offense can play to the expectation that they had, because they had down years from Ronald Acuna before he got traded. They had a down. I think Freddie Freeman had a down year as well. Albies had a down year for sure. If those players can get back to what they're expected to do, they're going to be in that second place spot. So that's why I have them, like the Mets and Atlanta kind of had opposite seasons. Mets did better than what we expected. Braves did worse than what they expected. And so I'm predicting them to finish where that expectation was because it's still about the same.
Makes sense.
And to the surprise of no one, our reigning World Series champions, we both predict will end up at the top of the division, because really the only change that they have to their team, period, is that Victor Robles, their stud defensive center fielder, is still a free agent. There is still time for Washington to re-sign him and basically bring back the exact same team that won the World Series last year. So there's no reason to think that they won't win the division again. Honestly, the record they finished at last year, I feel, was under what they should have ended at. We saw them struggling all year, which is why no one really predicted them to even make the World Series, much less win it once we hit playoff time. But we saw the talent finally come together and perform at the highest level and ended up taking the World Series.
Yeah, and I mean that lineup is just such a killer. They led the National League in basically every meaningful offensive category last year, and I know I've pointed this out on other podcasts, and you have too. And that was with a little bit of a down year comparatively speaking for Juan Soto. Yeah. It's hard for me to bet against Washington until proven otherwise. I know, again, their bullpen probably could use some help, but we said that all last season and all through the playoffs, and that was going to be their Achilles heel, and it just didn't end up mattering. Yeah. So
now the question is, can that be sustainable this year? Do we think is the bullpen kind of like a ticking time bomb? Like, will it at some point just implode on them, even if they do make the playoffs again this year? Because he didn't really, Pirate didn't really do anything to address that bullpen. It's pretty much the same team. And so you have to think, we thought last year that bullpen was the weak part of their game. Is the fact that they did not address the bullpen in the offseason going to come back to bite them? And what's the phrase? Remains to be seen is what I was trying to say, and I couldn't get the words out. That remains to be seen. Got it. Okay, we're good. Take 2. I'll cut out the first one. No, I'm kidding. But the fact of the matter is that you said Washington has one of the most formidable lineups in baseball. Quick hot seat question for you. Which lineup is better offensively, Washington or Seattle?
Oh, I probably would take Washington's.
Okay.
There's just so many guys in that lineup that not just can hit for power, but I think are more well-rounded hitters. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of really good sluggers in Seattle's lineup. I mean, either one I would love to have, but I would probably lean toward Washington.
I would probably lean towards Seattle. Actually, I'm more afraid of the potential of Seattle's lineup than I am of Washington's. Now, to be fair, that doesn't mean that it's 1A and 1B. Honestly, I'm still scared of Washington's
Yeah,
lineup.
we're splitting hairs either way. I
Yeah,
think
exactly. Those, I think we can agree, those are the two top lineups in the league. Well, Boston might be up there too.
Yeah, I think those three. I know that watching some of the other podcasts, I know Aiden really feels strongly that his lineup is going to show up and be one of the best. And theirs is a really good lineup, but I would have to say those three really kind of stand out, above some of the others.
All right. Well, there you have it. The NL East, we are matching just like we matched in the AL East. So are we setting us up for like a mirror performance of our AL predictions where we're going to drop the bombs on the West?
We might be.
Honestly, I think some shakeups are really going to happen in our own division, which is the NL Central. And I went first on NL East, so I'm making you go first on the NL Central.
Yeah. So
who's last?
This was a really tough one for me to really put the order.
Best division in baseball.
Best division in baseball, yes.
Not biased.
I think I'm gonna go with the Brewers in the last place in the fifth spot for us. And part of the reason I'm doing that is I have a feeling that Jay Hill, Jason Hellman, the GM of the Brewers, he made a couple moves in the offseason to try to get some reliable pitching. Sean Reed Foley, picked him up to try to help out that pitching staff a little bit. And I think what we might see, is middle of the season, if they're looking like they're not going to be in contention for the division or a playoff spot, I think I could see him selling off some pieces to try to recoup some prospects in that. So I have the Brewers there in the last place for our group.
That's who I had in last too. Dang nabbit, come on. I for all the same reasons. I just think that with the Brewers last year, they were hanging around in playoff contention up until about the beginning of September, and then they kind of fell on a losing streak. But one thing I kept pointing out, and I think I mentioned it a couple times in our podcast during the season, was that Milwaukee's record was a positive, a winning record in playoff contention, yet they had a negative run differential. And I figured that was going to catch up to them eventually. And it ended up happening. They faded out before the season was even close to being over. They didn't maintain their winning nature despite giving up more runs than they were scoring. And I don't think that while Jay Hill did make a couple of decent signings, really good supporting signings, I don't think he moved the needle enough to compete in the way that I think other teams in the NL Central improved this year. The Milwaukee Brewers are probably finishing fifth because they are the one team that didn't make a move that made the rest of the league buzz. Everyone else in this division made at least one move that did that. And I think because of that, they didn't get any better. Everyone else in the division did, and that's why they're going to end up last.
Can't argue with you there.
All right, so the fourth spot for me is I'm going to put the Pittsburgh Pirates there. They traded away their best hitter, and he stayed in the division. But you trade away a player Barrios' caliber, you can't expect to replace his production, especially with just one player. However, I still think a lot of his offensive players underperformed last year, aside from Barrios. So I think we could see the Pirates offense come back stronger this year than they were last year. Their pitching is still a little bit of a question mark outside of Koshin. So I can see that's why I have them at fourth, because I still see that question mark in their pitching. They could end up getting a lot of solid innings out of some journeyman players. Like they have Jacob deGrom that could eat some innings for them. It's just their rotation doesn't really inspire confidence to me like their lineup does. So maybe their lineup carries them to higher in the division. But as it stands right now, I think they end up in the 4 spot.
Yeah, that's where I have the Pirates as well. There's a ton of young talent with that organization, especially now with the Barrios trade. Um, and I think you're going to see some of those guys coming up this year to join with Barry Bonds Jr. and some of those other folks. And it wouldn't surprise me if they find a way to get hot and pick things up before then. They still have a real superstar with Cody Koshin, the two-way player,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those other guys. So the talent is there. It just might take an extra year, to get back into a real contending spot.
I agree. All right, number 3 from you.
Number 3 for me. I so want to put the Cubs here, but I have to put my Reds here at 3.
All right.
So I don't know that I want to talk too much about my team, but
You want me to talk about your team for you? Because that's where I have your team finishing too.
I really wanted to put myself in second place, but I just couldn't pull the trigger.
As much as the rival Cubs, I would also love to put them in third. You can't deny what the Cubs have done in their offseason. And the Reds, I think you jumped the Pirates because you took Barrios from them. I think that was the key. I definitely saw that you weren't going to finish last in the division, but adding Barrios to your lineup alongside the youngsters that you've got coming up in Trey Griffey, and you still have Taylor Trammell. You have some good pitching coming up as well. I think that you guys take a huge leap forward. I don't know if you're going to be in playoff contention. You might stay in the race for a while, but kind of fade out a little bit towards the end of the season. But this is definitely a big step forward for your team this year. And I think it's going to be led by Barrios and the young rookies that you've got coming up, especially Trey Griffey.
Yeah, I think the key for my team, from being, a third place team that has a solid good year and is a building block season to being a surprise and actually contending for a playoff spot. In my opinion, it's going to come down to 2 players in my starting rotation, and that's Victor Munoz and Christian Scott. I'm giving those 2 young guys really the ball and kind of letting them see what they can do in that rotation over the course of a full year. They're both ground ball guys that I think can fit well in my ballpark. Giving them some off-season training to add a 4th pitch for each one of them that I think will really help them out. So I'm very curious to see how they do.
Yeah, and not only that, you added an elite closer in Jordan Hicks to the back end of your bullpen. Player I know very well because I traded him to Colorado, San Diego, and then San Diego brought him right back to the division. So now I got to deal with him. Of course, to be fair, I dealt with him last year in the NLDS. He closed out my series, so yeah. All right, number 2. People are going to call me biased. But I'm going to do it anyway. I'm putting the Cubs number 2. And here's my reasoning for this. If I did not make the Royce Lewis trade, I would say the Cubs would take the division. They made some good moves. They added more firepower to their offense that they already had one of the top offenses in the league. I'd say Cubs are probably number 4, maybe behind Boston in terms of their lineup. But my question mark for them is you added Brendan Rodgers. You added Will Smith to your bullpen, but you didn't really address what we think is their biggest need, and that's their starting rotation. And I think the lack of depth in the starting rotation is going to be the reason why they finish in second in the NL Central.
Yeah, for that exact reason, I have them in second place also. Again, I was seriously considering flip-flopping the Reds and Cubs to put the Cubs in third place, mainly based off of that. That their lineup really, does have a lot of talented hitters, even before Brendan Rodgers came in. But I just am not sold on that starting pitching staff. I know they still, had a good record last year despite it, especially after they got the boost from Danny Smith Jr. being added in. And I know we have to factor that, he didn't even get to play a full season last year, and that's going to add some to them. But I just have a hard time putting a team, as a division winner with a starting rotation that looks like that.
Yeah. And as a result, completely unbiased from me, right? The Cardinals are we have the same order in both the divisions so far. What's going on? But the St. Louis Cardinals take the division, and I'll repeat what I said when I was talking about the Cubs. If I didn't trade for Royce Lewis, I think the Cubs would have taken the division. But I knew I needed to make a move offensively because that was my weak point last year. I went out, and some people say I gave up too much. Some people say it was a good deal. But regardless, I gave up that talent to Minnesota to add an impact player to the start of my lineup. Royce Lewis should succeed in getting on base in front of Dominic Aguilera and Ronald Acuna. And I hope that change, plus the return of the best bullpen in baseball last year, I think, in terms of ERA, as well as one of the top pitch rotations in the league. I wouldn't put my rotation as the tops in the league. I don't really know if I have someone like a true ace, unless you count Jeremy Frank, which some people do. I still think I'm tempering expectations. I don't want to think that his first year in the league is going to be what he does every year. I'm hoping he doesn't hit a sophomore slump, but I'm fully prepared for that. I need to see more consistent production out of Frank before I call him an elite pitcher. But I think the rotation is coming back completely the same, with a little bit of a mix-up in plugging in Loaizaga as a possible opener. And my bullpen is pretty much intact, and I added a couple pieces to it that I think are better than the pieces even better than the pieces I had last year. So, and I've got 2 impact rookies that are looking to make their debut to hopefully help with the offense too. In the 2 first basemen, Andrew Alexander, my CCP, and Benny the Jet Rodriguez, another CCP. So, hoping that Alexander, Rodriguez, and Lewis are the offensive changes that we need to overcome our weakness from last year.
Yeah, and I think that's where, for me, the biggest reason that I put you ahead of Chicago is I think your team is a much more well-balanced team. Your team has a higher floor than the Cubs do, with all the while still having a high ceiling. The Cubs have some like superstar players that, if they really fulfill the tip top of their potential, can just have amazing monster seasons. At the same time, if they don't reach that status, there's some holes on that club. I don't see holes with the Cardinals. From top to bottom, they're solid players all throughout. The Royce Lewis trade, I think you gave up a lot, but at the same time, they were all pieces you could afford to give up without taking really top prospects from your system or affecting your major league team.
Well, it took 2 of my top 4 prospects, actually.
Yeah, but
Tony Courtney and Mark Jones were 2 of my top 4 prospects.
They were, but you still have a pretty deep farm system where you can absorb that loss, and
they're getting a lot more shallow. I mean, the past 2 seasons I've traded for Acuna and for Lewis. I'm getting kind of thin now. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, but at the same time, you traded for superstars who are young, who you're going to have.
That's true.
For quite a while. That was the big thing for me with the Barrios trade. Was if I was going to give up a haul of prospects, I was going to give it up for somebody that was a youngish star who I was going to have under control, not a superstar.
Not like player. Alex Verdugo.
Well, not like Alex Verdugo. Yeah, I gave up more, I think, than what Aiden gave up for.
That's fair, and that was probably taken into account into the talent he gave up.
Right, but if Barrios was on a 2-year deal, I don't know that I make that trade.
That's fair. That's fair.
So, but in summary, again, I just think you just have a more well-balanced team. I feel much more comfortable if I was putting my money down on a division winner. For you versus the Cubs.
All right. Moving on to the NL West. And I will start with number 5. I'm going to go with the Colorado Rockies. I don't think they didn't really make a lot of moves this offseason, if I remember correctly. In fact, I'm trying to find their team summary here. Their biggest loss was Brendan Rodgers, and He's now in Chicago with the Cubs. So you lose his offensive output. Maybe you get that back with some of the younger players coming up for Colorado, but they didn't really get any better anywhere else. They didn't really make any moves this offseason. Now we have a new GM in Colorado, so he's probably kind of like biding his time, trying to get a feel of the land, trying not to make any decisions that are too rash, considering he's brand new and he doesn't want to overcorrect. So I completely understand doing it in that regard. You still have studs and Jim Horner at catcher and Seiya Suzuki in left field in your lineup, but Joel Machado is going to be an ace for a long time, but the supporting cast around him could definitely stand to have some improvement. You have a lot of players that are going to be around league average, maybe a little bit above league average. And when you look at the rest of the talent in the NL West, I think they're going to have a hard time competing.
Yeah, I think unfortunately they're kind of the easy choice, the Rockies, as the last place team. But again, there's a lot of building blocks on that team for I think it's Mike who's the new GM. Sorry,
yep.
If that's
that's right. That's right.
Okay, I thought
there's two Mikes in the NL West, but one's Sean Paxler. So
right. So I think there's definitely some talent to build upon there. I think you're just always faced with that challenge with a Colorado team is building that pitching staff out. Obviously,
that's difficult to do.
Yeah, I feel I have a hard time in my ballpark, and it's way more of a challenge in Colorado. So you mentioned Machado; he's definitely a guy to build around there. Now he did talk when he first took over the team about maybe moving Machado to try to get some prospect pieces back, and maybe if he got offered a deal like the Barrios deal or something along those lines, he may take it. But I'd probably stick to keeping him around to build around.
All right, sounds good. So who do you got at number 4?
I have the Diamondbacks at number 4. Arizona, kind of had a stranglehold on that division for a few seasons. Then last year, the Padres got off to such a strong start, and Arizona, kind of got off to a slow start. They got real hot toward the end of the season, and I think you and I both at one point there thought they were going to pull off the big comeback and
win
the division.
Yeah.
It didn't quite happen, but I just think this is one of those cases of some other teams making improvements. They could easily finish higher than 4th and contend again for the division title. They still have Aaron Cross back, and a lot of guys in that pitching staff that have been around a while, like Trevor Bauer and Juan DePaula, Mitch Keller. Those guys were the backbone of that team have been the backbone of that team for several seasons.
All right. So I debated about this for a long time, but I'm actually going to put the Dodgers at number 4. And the reason why, if you look at the Dodgers rotation, it's probably one of the scariest rotations in baseball to go up against. But then you look at their lineup and you're like, oh, this is a piece of cake. Not going to lie. Outside of Cody Bellinger. Bellinger is a stud out there in Los Angeles. But the rest of the Dodgers lineup doesn't really worry me at all. Like if I sent my pitching rotation up against them, despite the fact that the Dodgers have probably competing for one of the best rotations in baseball, I would probably say I'd be comfortable sticking with them because of the fact that my pitching should be able to handle their lineup no problem. They're going to struggle to score runs. They're going to rely on their pitching keeping scoring down in order to do something this season. And I still think they need to bring some more pieces along in terms of young hitters to improve that lineup. And another reason why, and I'm going to go ahead and do my 3rd place team, which is Arizona. The reason why I don't have Arizona at number 4 is even though talent wise, I could agree that Arizona looks like the 4th place team. Aaron just does something every season with the strategy of the Diamondbacks and somehow defies expectations, like the winning streak we saw last year. So I never want to count Arizona out for that reason. That Aaron's one of the most strategic minds in the league, and we talked during the winners and losers about how we thought Arizona was a loser. But watch Joey Gallo and Nick Ahmed do crazy well this year somehow in the way that Aaron utilizes them. So that's why I've got Arizona at number 3, just because I just feel like for some reason Aaron's going to pull that voodoo magic back out and and bring the Diamondbacks higher than our expectations. But I don't think they're going to be a playoff team again this year.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you could go a lot of different ways, especially with these two teams. I did have the Dodgers at number 3 in my standings. I do really like the rotation. I also feel like they have some guys coming up that are gonna be trouble there. Luke Wander, one of the top 100 prospects in eMLB, I think is probably going to start the season in that rotation. So I think he's going to give them a big boost there to go along with Snell and Peralta and Davis Rocose. I think they're going to form a pretty good group there with some other young arms in the bullpen. And I have a feeling that some of the young hitters are going to take a step forward this year and help to boost that offense some. Roy Hilton, I think, could be somebody that contributes in that outfield a little more than he did last year. You got Teddy Kemp. I think we could see him up and starting to really make his case there for that team. And so I think you're going to see some of those young bats really come around as the season goes on, and I think that's going to help them move up a little bit.
Yeah, I just think for me, I think the Dodgers lineup is a year out from being that consistent production because they still have those young guys that need to develop. But they could develop early, like you're saying. They might take a step up this year.
Yeah.
All right. So who you got at number 2?
Number 2, I have the Padres.
Oh, now this is a discussion starter. The reigning NL West champs are finishing second for you.
Yeah, I think
you got some splaining to do.
I really like this Padres team. I have to be honest. I mean, Fernando Tatis, obviously, maybe the best player in the league. If not, very, very close. Asher Kim, tremendous shortstop. Posted an 8.5 WAR last year. So, obviously they form a really great combo there. You're getting Yuna Kim showing up there in center field. That's going to get a full season there. So, I mean, they have a really great team. Steve has put together a really tremendous roster there. But we're hearing that they're looking ahead to where they're going to try to free up some money to sign some of these studs to extensions. They didn't make moves in the offseason to trade too many guys off. They traded Hicks to me to move some money around. There's been rumblings, that he could potentially move Francisco Mejia from behind the plate. He's one of the best catchers in the league. I wouldn't put it past some move like that to still happen once we get in season. That could take a little shine off that club. But I still think they're gonna be right there in contention for the playoffs all season long.
All right. Well, this is where we're gonna differ because I've got the Giants finishing in second. With the Giants, I think it's more like it's one of those like matter of time before they are the NL West Division champions. I just think this year it's going to be hard to upend San Francisco when they have a bunch of stud players in their lineup. When you talk about Fernando Tatis, Asher Kim, Yuna Kim, and Franmil Reyes, 4 of the top hitters in the league. And the only reason we're not talking about San Diego as one of the top lineups in the game is because there is a little bit less of a supporting staff around them as I go ahead and put San Diego as my division champions. But but those 4 alone, like you got an MVP out of Fernando Tatis. You had Asher Kim right behind as I think got the 3rd place number of votes in the MVP voting, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But both of those players alone, and then you add in Yuna Kim, who was injured for part of the end of the season last year, and wasn't able to keep carrying San Diego. And then Franmil Reyes is absolute beast at the plate. That's hard to overcome. And they still have a solid pitching staff. They added Palante from the Hicks trade to help shore up their starting rotation. They still have at least a solid bullpen. It may be, it's not anything to write home about, but I think they'll get the job done. With San Francisco, I know I was talking about how the Giants are in second, and ended up talking more about San Diego being the division winners. San Francisco is going to be scary after this season. This year, they're going to make waves. They're going to be in playoff contention because they've got a lot of young talent ready to go. I just think before they are one of the top teams in the league, they're going to have to go through a little bit of growing pains this year as they improve on their performance from last year. So what do you think? Why do you think the Giants overtake the Padres for the division?
So for me, the two biggest reasons that I'm going with the Giants here are Jandy Ronson in the rotation and Michael Sean Kane in the lineup. I think, the combination of Jandy Ronson and Ethan Candela at the head of that rotation, we could see a similar effect to what we saw with Baltimore last year with Ethan Knight and Jim Reed, where you have two just electric starters at the front end of your rotation who really lead the way. But they also have, some other guys behind them, your Jeremy Hoxie, your Ridge Heisler, Brad Keller, potentially guys that, are some reasonable starters as well. So that they don't have that, really, hole of a fifth starter position there. And then, when it comes to the lineup, Michael Sean Kane, has been incredible for them leading the way. I see him, really taking another big step forward as one of the best bats in the league. You got Dan King, who's a great leadoff hitter. I think, you really like their signing of Backho Kang in the offseason.
The corner outfielder
Who I think can really have an impact. And, they've got solid infielders. I mean, it's not the best lineup in the world, but when you have, some linchpins like Kane and King to go along with some solid bats across the board, combined with that rotation, I think it carries them a long way. And I think we're going to see, we always see some kind of surprise in these division races and surprise winners. And I think the Giants are one of those this year.
I'll just make one more point about the Giants and why I think they'll end up in second as opposed to first, which is still not bad. That's a definite improvement for them this year. I think their bullpen worries me a little bit. I think that the Giants will be looking to add a bullpen piece at the deadline to solidify their playoff run. If they make a big splash and get a good bullpen piece, I think they could win the division. But right now, as their bullpen stands, I think they'll end up in second.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be in the market for bullpen help. Absolutely.
For sure. All right, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. These are our division standings predictions, and we're going to do a little bit different than the AL predictions. We're going to jump over to the award predictions before we get into any playoff predictions, because we want to save the best for last. We're going to do our World Series ones today.
Should we do the wild cards before we get to the awards?
No, because that's playoff stuff.
All right.
We'll leave the cliffhanger. Like, who do we actually think is going to make the playoffs? We know 3 teams. For you, it was Washington, St. Louis, and San Francisco. And for me, it's the same, except I flopped San Diego with San Francisco.
Right.
So you guys know that, but you don't know who we have for our 2 wildcard teams yet. So we'll leave it in suspense until then. But let's talk about awards. Let's start with Rookie of the Year. I'll go first because I'm going to toot your horn a little bit. I think this year's Rookie of the Year is stud center fielder Trey Griffey. And this in a glut of center field studs that we have in the National League, and I think Trey Griffey, bold prediction, ends up as a better player than Barry Bonds Jr. I think Trey Griffey can have more of an impact on this Cincinnati team. And it's going to be one of the main reasons why you guys jump to the 3rd place spot in your division and take a huge step forward on your way to competing for the division in the future. This kid is going to be a stud. I'm sure he's going to be someone. I'm looking at his power. I'm like, how can you put him at a leadoff hitter even though he has that speed? He's got so much power. That dude's a 5-tool player, and I just think he's going to absolutely mash in Great America Ballpark. And not only that, but he is the defensive mind center fielder that you always want in your lineup, and he just adds in the bonus of probably one of the best bats in the league.
Yeah, the great thing for Trey this year is I'm actually going to be hitting him second in the lineup. So
okay,
he'll have
that's probably a good spot.
He'll have Taylor Trammell leading off in front of him, and he's going to have Edgar Barrios hitting behind him. So,
and see, for the last 2 seasons, I've wanted to put Aguilera in the 2 spot for kind of similar reasons because he's more of an RBI guy than a leadoff guy, and I finally got a leadoff guy. So I could completely understand putting Griffey in the 2 spot because that's the same mindset as I've got.
Yeah.
So who's your rookie of the year this year?
So great pick. Obviously, I feel like, but
I had to pick him for you, so you didn't feel pressured to pick your own player. Okay.
Yeah. I don't like to pick my own players for awards, but it's not that he's going to win it in a runaway. I think there's plenty of other talented rookies. I'm going to go with Aiden Pearson, who we all know the real Aiden Pearson from Here's Why You're Wrong, of course, and the Atlanta GM, but his community creative player is one of those really talented CCP catchers who got a little taste of the bigs last year with Atlanta, had about a little over 100 plate appearances, kind of his first dipping his toe in the water, so to speak. But this year he's going to be the full-time guy behind the plate. He's already got really good defense as a catcher, really good arm. But he's got tremendous power as well, in that catching role that is so valuable. If you can get a catcher that can hit like that and also put together great defense, that's such a huge advantage to have on your team. And again, kind of like Griffey, he's not going to have a huge amount of pressure on him because there are some, plenty of other talented guys in that lineup hitting around him. So he doesn't have to carry the ball. He kind of, can step into it and, really just let the game come to him. And he's got a ton of talent, and I think it's going to be on display this year.
All right. Sounds good. Who you got for the Cy Young?
For the Cy Young, he came pretty close last year. Joe Diggs ended up winning it, but I've got Jeremy Frank.
Okay.
Your St. Louis Cardinals.
All right.
Coming in there, he was a great free agent signing last year. Kind of came out of nowhere. Had that, great story from the independent leagues that he showed up and just had, as a phenomenal year.
Yes.
And I think earlier you referenced not being sure whether you have an ace on your staff, and I definitely think he's an ace, and I think he's going to have an even better season this year. Being that true head of the rotation, having a year in the major leagues under his belt, and I think that's really going to give him a way to step forward even bigger this in 2026.
Yeah, I'm just always wary about some of my players coming off of fantastic seasons. I look at Joe Adell from my team. The first year I had him after the trade with Los Angeles, he put up over 40 home runs and was a staple in the center of my lineup. So I signed him to a nice extension, and then his bat just fell off a cliff last year. And I am so terrified that the same thing's going to happen with Jeremy Frank, that the first year he plays for me, he's an absolute stud. If it wasn't for the ridiculous seasons that Kent Herbeck and Antonio Alvarez had, he probably could have won Rookie of the Year, and he did get some Cy Young votes. I'm just scared of him falling off a cliff again. I'm just totally bracing myself for that. So I appreciate the confidence that you gave. I think Brendan also gave confidence to Jeremy Frank over on Here's Why You're Wrong. So I hope he does perform the way you guys do. I'm just expecting a cliff dive.
And that's
fully expecting it.
And that's understandable. You don't want to jinx him. I get
exactly. So my Cy Young, I kind of went with the easy choice, honestly. Generational talent, Jandy Ronson out of San Francisco. I mean, he can do everything. He keeps the ball on the ground. He doesn't walk people. He strikes out people. Like, he is literally the do-it-all pitcher. And in his first taste in the majors at 19 years old, jeez, 15-year-old, that'd be ridiculous. Um, he pitched to the tune of a 3.39 ERA, had he six and a third K per nine. So he's putting up pedestrian numbers, but I think that was because of his first taste in the majors. I think he's absolutely going to explode this season. He has the talent. There's a reason why he was the number 1 overall pick in our draft last year. He's just that much of a generational talent at the starting pitching spot. And so I think he culminates that into a Cy Young performance this year.
Yeah, can't really go wrong there.
No. This is why I'm surprised everyone's talking about Jeremy Frank more than Jandy Ronson. I would rather, sorry, Frank, I'd rather have Ronson on my team. All right. I know you said you don't like picking your players, but I'm going to be the weird one. And I'm going to be a homer. And it's purely because of the ridiculous numbers that he put up once I brought him over from Atlanta. And I say the MVP of the season is going to be Ronald Acuna Jr. And I you guys know me, I'm a stats guy. I got to read off the stats to you for Acuna after he came over to St. Louis. In 59 games, he maintained a 390 batting average, a 457 on base percentage, 657 slugging, to the tune of a 1.114 OPS, a 3.8 WAR. He walked over 10% of the time, which is a huge factor for me in my lineup. And he also hit 13 home runs, where he hit 14 home runs in 35 more games in Atlanta. And my park is a pitcher's ballpark. So the ball ain't flying very well out of St. Louis, and he managed to almost match his home run total in Atlanta in 35 fewer games. And based on that, if he keeps that production, now, once again, same thing with Jeremy Frank, I'm expecting a nosedive because those numbers are really not sustainable, honestly. But he did it over a 59-game span, and that's pretty impressive. If he is anywhere close to those numbers, that's an MVP type season. And so I'm hoping that he keeps up that production in St. Louis. And if he does, he's going to be the MVP.
Yeah, he had a phenomenal, last couple months of the season after coming over. So it will be interesting to see what he does over the course of a full season, there in St. Louis. I'm going with somebody that ties into my last division winner pick. I'm going with Michael Sean Cain of the Giants. I think this is a case where, we talked about that the Giants, if they were to win the division, it would be a surprise. It would be them kind of really taking a big jump forward. And I think that happens because Michael Sean Cain takes an even bigger step forward this season. He finished, led the National League in on-base percentage last year. He was second in OPS, second in runs created per 27 outs. He had a great season again, kind of like you kind of like Acuna in a ballpark that's more favorable to pitchers. It's definitely out in San Francisco. It's not necessarily a hitter's haven, and that's why when you look at his some of his adjusted numbers, they really really stand out even more there. But I definitely see him. He's got a lot of power. He's the leader of that team, even at his young age. And I just think he's going to have an even bigger monster season for that club that's on the rise. And I think he's gonna help drive them to the postseason.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of those, any of the points that you made. He is definitely a stud in this league. And if you combine my Cy Young pick with your MVP pick, then your prediction of the Giants winning the NL West probably will come true. If you end up with the Cy Young and the MVP on the same team, that's a scary team to have to face. That is for sure.
That's true.
All right. We've delayed it long enough. And we're going to move into our National League playoff predictions as well as our World Series predictions. So switching over here, you see I've already got it set up to where I've got the league champions, Detroit for my side, Tampa Bay for JR's side, who we made our picks over on the AL podcast. If you did not heed my warning, that's on you. You should have went and watched it first. So we have our NLDS. We have 3 of the teams ready there. So I've got, where's Washington? There's Washington, St. Louis, and San Diego. And then you have Washington, St. Louis, and San Francisco. So here's the first main question that we left the cliffhanger on. Who are the wild card teams? So just to do, well, we don't even need to do a recap. They can probably remember who we had second or third because it could be a third place team making the wild card.
Yeah.
Now, just for everyone's note, we don't have the expanded playoffs that the MLB implemented this year. That will more than likely be coming once we have our expansion next year, where we will be adding 2 more teams to the league, which JR and I were talking, will probably mean the end of the eMLB Insider Division rivalry, because we are assuming that the Cardinals will end up on a western side and the Reds will end up on an eastern side in the National League, just based on the team's locations. So that's going to be disappointing if that happens. But anyway, that expanded playoffs will happen then. So we still only have 2 wild card spots that we have to fill. All right. Who is your top wild card? Who's going to have the home field advantage in the wild card game?
I think the NL wild card games when we played at Wrigley, the Cubs.
Ooh, okay.
The Cubs there in that top wild card spot.
All right, and I'm going to show the confidence that you showed in your NL West division winner. I'm going to say the Giants are going to host the wild card game.
Nice, very nice.
And I will say that they are going to be playing the Cubs. I think the Cubs lineup is just too formidable. I think Atlanta gives them a good run for their money for the last wild card spot, but I think the Cubs end up eking it out at the very end.
Nice. Well, we have all the same 5 playoff teams in there because I have the Padres as the second wild card there.
All right. So there you have it. The only difference is our NL West teams, we flipped who were the wild card and the division winners. So no huge surprise there. So who wins the wild card matchup? I'll go first because you revealed your teams first. I say that the Giants take out the Cubs, take advantage of that home field, and they will move on and play their NL West rivals in the San Diego Padres, because I say the Padres are going to end up with the best record in the National League.
Wow. Okay. So I have the Padres winning, beating the Cubs there as well. I have them facing the Nationals. I feel like the Nationals will end up with the best record in the National League.
All right. So NLDS, we have on my side, I'm going to say that the Nationals end up with the 2 seed. So I'm going to say the Nationals have home field advantage over my Cardinals. And then who do you have as the home team with the Cardinals versus the Giants?
I have the Cardinals as the 2 seed there.
All right. Sounds good. So I'll go first with the 2-3 matchup, Washington versus St. Louis. I think, and I'm hoping, that my pitching is going to overcome the lineup of the Nationals, especially when it comes to my bullpen. And I hope my offense takes advantage of a non-improved Nationals bullpen. Now, obviously, they could improve it at the trade deadline, like we talked about with other teams. But I think that the Cardinals take it in 4.
All right. Yeah, big time. So should I go to the 2-3?
Go to the 2-3 matchup. Yeah. The
All
Washington, right. San Diego. No, Cardinals Giants. Sorry.
Cardinals Giants. Yeah. This is a tough one for me. I think, it comes down a lot of times, I think, in the playoffs, again, to kind of the lead of your pitching staff, kind of like with Baltimore last year. So I'm going with the Giants pulling the upset there over the Cardinals.
Bummer. All right. Who you got between the Nationals and the I almost said Pirates. Padres.
It's so tough to repeat when you're the Nationals and you've won the World Series and you're going back again. And I feel like maybe at that point the Padres will be on a roll. So I'm going Padres to take out the Nationals.
Ooh. So while I have the NL West teams meeting in the NLDS, you actually have them meeting in the NLCS.
Yes.
For an NL West 7-game showdown. That'll be fun. In terms of my last NLDS, like I mentioned when I was talking about my division standings, I think the Giants are 1 year out from being true World Series contenders. I think the Padres take that series in 5. It's going to be a close one, but I think the Padres, with their experience from last year, I think that they overtake the Giants. So, as a result, and like I had to put San Diego here for this row. Well, because I had this Padres as the top seed. You had the Padres had the wild card team, so the Giants are in first, or the home field there. Okay, so Padres hosting the Cardinals, Giants hosting the Padres. I'll go first with the NLCS. I unfortunately think, like last year, the Padres are going to be the bane of the Cardinals' playoff performance. They knocked us out of the NLDS last year in 5 games, and I think honestly they will knock us out of the NLCS in 7. I just think that they have too many top tier bats that I think will actually have a chance to overtake my pitching.
That would be a heck of a series to watch, I think. I think that would be a really good.
It was good last year in the 5-game series.
Yeah. So 7 games would be a fun one to watch there. For me, I went back and forth on this once I came out of this NLCS matchup. I think at this point I'm going to keep riding that Giants train to the World Series. I think Jandy Ronson, Ethan Candela in playoff baseball in a series is just a real tough matchup to beat.
All right, so there you have it, folks. The NL champions are both coming out of the NL West for us. Me choosing San Diego, JR choosing San Francisco, which means we have completely different World Series matchups, which I think is great. I think it shows that there's a lot of diversity in this league, a lot of even level talent, that we could have a World Series where we're not saying, oh, it's definite that this team is going to come out of the AL or this team's going to come out of the NL. So here's the question, though. On everyone's mind, who do we think will win the World Series? And I'm going to let you go first since I did the NLCS first.
I love both of these teams. I like both Mike and Charles. I think that's why, in a way, maybe I'm more rooting for this World Series matchup, than maybe going to the numbers and seeing what will shake out.
I see that means you just don't want to root for me. I see how it is.
Well, like that still is a part of my brain, like Cardinals.
But it's me. No, I'm kidding.
But all that being said, I think it would be a great series. I would give the edge to the Rays taking home the trophy.
All right. So there you have it. JR's prediction is Rays over the Giants in...
let's say 6.
In 6. All right. I'm going to predict another 7-game series between the Tigers and the Padres. And at the end of it all, the war of attrition will go to San Diego. I think San Diego, despite the fact that they didn't make a lot of moves last year, I think their young talent is going to improve enough. And they're not going to have, hopefully the Tatis injury isn't that long, so they won't have to miss him for too much of the season. And as long as they avoid major injury like they did with Yuna Kim last year, and their pitching holds up, I think they end up taking the series over Detroit in 7. And it's going to be a great matchup because, like I said in the AL preview, Detroit has something to prove, and they're going to give San Diego all they got. But I think in the end, after 7 games, San Diego's going to be standing as champions.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see, again, as you mentioned before, the Padres have a lot of superstar talent, and sometimes star talent just outweighs everything else.
I mean, we saw that with the Nationals last year. The star talent was able to outweigh the weakness of the bullpen.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you don't have to worry about once you're in the playoffs, you can trust your star talent to carry you over 5 or 7 games, as opposed to your star talent carrying you over a 162 game season.
Right.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are our full playoff predictions. Interesting. It's going to be a very fun season because watch some team come out of nowhere and blow all of this up. Even though we predicted some blow, like JR predicted 2 Cinderella stories in Seattle and San Francisco, I believe.
Yeah. They
both have the talent to perform this year, but as far as they're going, I don't think a lot of people agree with you. So we'll have to see if the great mind of JR is accurate on these scenarios. Honestly, I'm hoping I'm wrong just because I want to win the World Series. So, I mean, I just think that San Diego matched up with me really well, and I think that they are just going to be a hard team to beat come playoff time, just like they were for me last year. So, with that being said, that is going to be all for us on this. I'm clicked on the wrong window. There we go. Transitions, gotta love them. That's going to do it for us with our NL predictions. Coming up before the start of the eMLB 2026 season, we will be giving probably the favorite segment on the eMLB Insider. We will be doing our preseason top 10 power rankings, and you don't want to miss that. That'll be coming up before the end of this week, before we have our opening day on Saturday. Once again, want to remind you that Thursday through Sunday of this week will be Commish's annual fundraiser for the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. There are a bunch of flyers that are starting to go around the internet on who is going to be streaming when, and links to also donate are going around specifically in Commish's stream. So make sure you find all the information on that and join us for a great time where we all work together to raise money to strike out cancer in kids. And it is definitely a great cause. A lot of different streamers are participating and supporting this event, so be sure to come out, support the streamers, support the cause, and it's going to be a great time because at eMLB opening days this Saturday, we've got 2 great games in store. We're starting off with the classic NL Central rivalry, Cardinals Cubs, the 2 teams that ended atop the NL Central last year, only apart by 1 game. We'll start off our season on Saturday, followed up by the Mariners and the Astros, a good AL West rivalry where we get to see if Seattle gets off on the right foot with JR's lofty predictions for them. And then following that, we also have some Sunday games that are going to take place for the first week of the season. I don't remember them off the top of my head, so I'm going to look right now, unless you've already got them. We are still looking for those, I think. Yes, we are still looking for those games. So if you're a GM and you want to have your game featured on Sunday's stream, be sure to talk in the game of the day interest chat because we are still looking for games to feature there. So it's going to be a great weekend. It's already been a great week with all the content from the Insider, the Here's Why You're Wrong. It's looking to be another fun season. I cannot wait to see where this season goes. Any last thoughts from you, JR, as we wrap up our predictions for the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you know, as our shows here, we've talked about, there's a lot of different ways these divisions could shake out. There's a lot of different ways these awards could shake out. It just shows just the depth and the parity that we have in our league in a good way. I know sometimes people don't like parity. They like to have the monster teams, but I think we still have some really, really big teams that, you could see them competing with each other. And at some point, there's only 5 teams in each league going to the playoffs. So there's going to be a couple teams who a lot of people think highly of who are not going to be able to be part of October baseball.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the marks of us having a great league is that there aren't a couple teams that are far and away the best teams in the league. You could have any number of teams. And honestly, I'll just give a little bit of spoiler. I can see any team in the top 10 of my power rankings winning the World Series this year. And maybe even a couple teams outside of the top 10.
Yeah, there's several teams. Well, maybe not several teams. There's at least a couple teams that, are outside the playoffs for me who, if they ran through and won the World Series, I really wouldn't be too shocked by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just how stacked our league is right now. And
I mean, heck, both of us had the defending AL conference champions, league champions, Baltimore Orioles out of the playoffs. That's how crazy this league can get. Is we have the AL champions not even in the playoffs this year. Both of us did. Now, again, we wouldn't be surprised if they made a run of the World Series again because they were in the championship last year. But that just shows how good the quality of this league is, and we're seeing other teams that didn't make the playoffs making strides to contend. So it's just raising the talent level all around. It'll be exciting to see how the season shakes out. We are probably in for surprises that none of us even see coming, I'm sure. Like, for example, the Kansas City run at the end of the season was something that none of us saw coming. We thought Detroit had that division well in hand, but Kansas City was like, we ain't giving up yet. We're not out until the clock hits 0, and they made it. So we could see something like that happen again this year. So,
Yeah.
But until next time, we will be coming at you with our power rankings next episode, and then we'll probably take a little bit of a break once the opening day starts because we've done a lot this week.
Yeah.
And but we hope to keep maintaining at least a semi-consistent schedule of streams of podcasts for you all throughout the 2026 eMLB season. So get used to seeing our faces around. And also, we still will be taking people who want to be interviewed. We'll still do interview podcasts as well. We don't want to nix those out, but we figured it was easier for us to go ahead and get these predictions out of the way before we go back to our interview podcast. So if you are interested in being interviewed sometime this season, once we get past opening day, please let us know. And until next time, this has been the eMLB Insider, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everyone.